Mother Teresa once said, "You can do things I cannot. I can do things you cannot. Together, we can do great things." Here's more from Willow Baker on partnerships and collaborations.
This is Willow Baker, and we're exploring partnerships and collaborations for peace education. Please welcome Elena Valcarcel, General Manager of Málaga Club of UNESCO and Vice President of the Spanish Federation of UNESCO Associations and Clubs. Elena will tell us about how her organizations are partnering for peace education.
From this jewel, the city of Málaga, the Spanish Federation of Associations, the Centers and Clubs for UNESCO, is very grateful to be part of this team, to be able to contribute to this virtual conference and highlight education as a vehicle towards peace, helping to establish the International Day of Education for Peace within the United Nations system, to build peace in people's minds. It is in the minds of men and women that the defense for peace must be built. UNESCO sends this profound message to humanity. Knowledge and learning are the greatest renewable resources to respond to challenges and create alternatives. In fact, education does more than to respond to a changing world. Education transforms the world. How? With education, because education transforms people's lives. Education is at the heart of UNESCO's mission to build peace, to eliminate poverty, and promote sustainable development. UNESCO is the only United Nations agency whose mandate covers all aspects of education. UNESCO states that education is a human right and a force for sustainable development and peace. All the objectives of the United Nations 2030 Agenda require education to equip people with the knowledge, skills and values necessary to live with dignity, build their lives, and contribute to their societies. UNESCO is spearheading the 2030 Sustainable Development Objective No. 4 Agenda to establish a culture of peace and sustainable development as the core of its mandate. UNESCO's new initiative is Education, Learning to Be. If we think together, we can act together to achieve the future we want together. Its purpose is to rethink education, to reimagine how knowledge and learning can shape the future of humanity and the planet. This requires political will, global and regional collaboration, and also the commitment of governments, the civil society, the private sector, youth, the UN, and other multilateral entities. We must act together to address educational challenges and build inclusive systems in an increasingly complex, uncertain, and precarious world. Why an International Day of Education for Peace? The strongest foundation for peace lies in the respect for the equality of dignity in people. That's why education is so essential. To educate for peace is to promote the development of skills and tools that allow people to live together without violence. This process involves the assimilation of values such as social justice, equality, cooperation, solidarity, respect, and autonomy. Education is a force for teaching and understanding, and for building new sources of dialogue. Understanding education from a global perspective means learning to be, to know the peace that resides in the heart of each human being, to live together for mutual enrichment. And once again, remember UNESCO's mandate, education throughout life. This is a very powerful tool. Each day, it brings the possibility to grow in knowledge and provide clarity, joy, and love in people's lives. Nobel laureate Nelson Mandela, also known as Madiba, offers us the following wise advice. The first thing is to be honest with oneself. You can never have an impact in the society if you haven't changed yourself. One of the most important weapons for changing oneself is to recognize that we need peace, that everyone wants peace. We have a limited time here on earth. We must try to use that period for the purpose of transforming ourselves into what we wish to be. Peace is necessary, and peace education is essential. Both are needed to exist. Peace is the fundamental pillar of human rights. Without peace, there is neither evolution nor growth. And in closing, I present to you the Spanish Federation of Associations, the Centers and Clubs for UNESCO. And what is their mandate? Our mandate is to coordinate partnerships, UNESCO centers and clubs in Spain. Our mission is to spread the original principles that created UNESCO and to commit the peoples of the world to carry them out. These principles are to contribute in the foundation of civic education, the democratic principles of dignity, equality, freedom and justice, and respect for human rights, and understanding among peoples and a culture of peace according to the ideals and principles of UNESCO. To contribute to the protection and promotion of the culture and native languages of the Spanish state. To strengthen the ties and coordination among its own members, and to maintain relations of cooperation with other international federations of UNESCO's civil society.
El 25 de octubre en Madrid, 75 aniversario de Naciones Unidas y UNESCO, organizado por la Federación Española de Asociaciones, Centros y Clubs para la UNESCO. La sociedad civil, pilar fundamental hacia la paz, con la participación del secretario general de las Naciones Unidas, don Antonio Gutiérrez, y la directora general de la UNESCO, la señora Audrey Azoulay. '75th Anniversary of United Nations and UNESCO, October 25th in Madrid. Organized by the Spanish Federation of Associations, Clubs and Centers for UNESCO, with the participation of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, and the Director General of UNESCO, Ms. Audrey Azoulay.
This is Willow Baker again. We're talking about partnerships and collaborations for peace education, this time in India. We're going to hear from Professor Dr. Beena Chintalapuri, a key contributor to the development of Unnati Program in Telengana Prisons and Professor Emeritus of Psychology at Osmania University, Hyderabad, India. Unnati, which means progress, is a cognitive behavioral change program with which I am familiar because it includes the Prem Rawat Foundation's Peace Education Program. The program was implemented in 11 prisons in Telangana state. Some of these prisons have seen recidivism drop by 95%, and as a result, 5 of the prisons were closed. Here's Professor Beena.
So I asked the prison authorities, can I have about half a dozen good prisoners inside who are convicted and who stay there, who have some insights into the prison and the behavior. So they gave me half a dozen of them. We had a very interesting first meeting. I still remember very vividly under a tree. We were all sitting on the grass and we were sharing our experiences. I requested them, how about you coming and just observe? When I talk, I would be bringing maybe examples from students, college, from academics. How about you observing and then fine tune with your input? So they started, in that particular session, that particular batch, they sat and every day when we had a debrief of session, the amount of finesse they brought, the amount of examples they brought amount of insights they brought to the table, I was amazed. And I knew at that point of time, they are the ones who are key to this whole program.
Absolutely.
I put a program for them. I got them to understand what is training discipline, how do we improve on ourselves when we step on into the training stage, platform, and how do we deal with. So brought in a lot of such input to them, and they liked the whole idea. For them, it was something like a new identity. That they are not, they may be prisoners, they are inmates, convicted inmates, but they are Unnati volunteers.
Yes.
So that was a beautiful status for them. They were very proud of this. They had some badges. Their names had Unnati tag on them.
Okay.
They would come with books, pens, walk inside like students, like teachers, and subsequently they have contributed maximum. They do the whole facilitation.
So would you say that whatever these great numbers that you have achieved, like you have given Unnati, 9,000 plus inmates have undergone Unnati, and less than 100 people have returned. So whom would you give the success to?
The success is to facilitators. Success is also, I would attribute it to prison authorities. They were kind to give whatever facilities I had asked. They never said no to me. And these 10 prisons, if we are doing it because of the support of the superintendents there and DG and IG, at some point they said, okay, we are not asking, she's not asking anything. And this is for our betterment of our inmates. They have a very strong sense of reformation. They have noticed that the culture of the prisons is slowly changing. There were violence and aggression is slowly coming down. They were seeing all these things. And they said, they allowed me to continue. And now if I say to the prisoners that, okay, let's stop Unnati, they get so upset. They said, no, we cannot stop. What about our brothers?
Yes.
We would like to do this. We would like to continue this. So development of these volunteers, these inmates as volunteers, and now they don't want, they start calling themselves as change makers.
Wow, that's beautiful.
They love that word called change makers. We are change makers, they say.
Yes.
They don't want to use the word volunteer. So this input, I think, is very important. So it's not only that we are looking inside how they have to, understand themselves, peaceful, and prepare themselves to go out and get mainstream, but also from outside, they will be shown a picture as to what is likely to happen. What should they anticipate outside? In a typical Indian household, in a typical Indian family, culture, weddings, so what would happen to them?
Yes.
So those things, that input is very important. We call this as a special mulaqat. We also have one session where family of these batch participants, families are invited. And then we explain to them, we tell them, look, this is what the volunteers do this session. They tell them that, look, your children, your sons have a chance to stay out. They're stuck because we are life imprisoned section. So you people take care. When he comes or she comes, you need to take care of them. And these are the ways that you can take care. Help them to cope. Be vigilant. So they give a very beautiful session on that. And many times parents They realize what they missed, and these boys realize what their parents are.
Mm. Yes.
So they confess, openly they confess, they apologize to parents. And that's a very beautiful thing to witness.
Mm. Yes, ma'am, absolutely. So there is just one last question from my end. Seeing that you have huge support from prison system as well as the inmates themselves, because they themselves are trying to change their mindsets and they're changing the perceptions of fellow inmates as well. And I think from what you say, you also have a strong support of research scholars as well. But apart from all of these things, what are the other things that you're expecting in society for people to have that change in their mindset?
How will people outside the prison understand that these individuals are different in the sense they are not very different. I'm sorry, they are not different. For some reason they are inside. What they have done, they accept. They have already received the punishment. They go to the bail, all these things go on. And after they come out, they tell me that we should not restrict Unnati inside the prison. We are doing something to people after they have committed, and then they have come inside, and then we are doing something. This program is worthy that we should do it outside, maybe to students, to community. The released prisoners, sometimes I get an opportunity to do it in universities, colleges, and other community settings. They come, they share the platform with me, and they speak to people. Look, you need to inform your children. You need to take care about your children like this. And you are students. You need to not go beyond this line, which is the borders which have been put for you there. So they have their own way. They are very powerful speakers. They with their examples, they tell them that this is how they have to mend their behavior. This is how they are likely to go out of control when it comes to drugs, when it comes to alcohol, when it comes to depression. So they have a very interesting message to give it to them, and that's a very beautiful thing, which they do it. And I have seen in some of the platforms in the colleges, like engineering college and other places, they receive them very well. You will never realize that a released prisoner is received so well.
Okay.
I have seen in some colleges, they come back with the, Anna, can you give me an autograph?
Wow.
So these released fellows will say, oh my God, we are celebrities overnight.
Nice.
So there is a lot of inhibition, a lot of stigma also gets shed. They come out confidently.
Yes.
1 or 2 sessions when they share a platform with me, they feel so good. They feel that they are contributing.
Yes, ma'am.
And I must mention to you about Premrawat Foundation's program on peace education. We do 1 or 2 sessions only to build rapport with them, get them to all accept all these. And at some point we start introducing peace, because peace is something which is so important. Unless they are really peaceful and comfortable with themselves, they will not be able to receive, or they will not be able to retain what is learned here. So we treat them with a lot of respect. They are in a very decent environment. I must say, in our class, in our training hall, we don't have cameras. Otherwise, the rest of the places there are cameras. We don't have. And we don't have any uniform person sitting inside the classroom. So that is a very comfortable, very free environment where even volunteers, the lifers, they feel very comfortable in communicating what they're supposed to communicate.
Okay.
There is respect there. There is a lot of appreciation. We do appreciation from Peace Education Program. We do something about hope, dignity, choice. It comes as a very beautiful package, which is placed in the center because that's very strategically put.
Okay.
Where else you think dignity is required? Because this community is stigmatized, they lose dignity. In our activity, they will come out with how they have lost their dignity and how they're shameful. And here they are put back as to how they should take this and keep their head high, take pride in their whatever is positive in them, their own self, and how they are portrayed as stars. That's how the activity takes it forward. Then how choices and the consequences, how careful they should be. They should be conscious about the choice which they make. Yes. The stories from Prem Rawat's Peace Education Program are read out. And we are so fortunate that Mr. Prem Rawat had come to Charlapalli prison and he delivered a session there, a lecture. And that is still remembered. They play that. In every batch, after 2 choice and inner strength sessions, they play that video. Several times I tell them, no, let's get the other video and let's play the other video. Till today, all the volunteers say, no, we love this video. It has beautiful stories. It captures everything which we require. Practice, time, strength, choice. So they say everything is packed into this.
Yes.
So I don't disturb that, and they love that and they play that. So this is how we go about with these programs. And again, I must say that things have changed with Telengana Prisons.
Okay.
With peace education, with Unnati. Sometimes I wonder whether Unnati embedded peace education or peace education embedded Unnati. But both are integral part. So we deliberate, we sit and think about how we need to go about with it. And now the volunteers are very, very knowledgeable. They are educated. They are great advisors to the program.
So thank you so much, Beena ma'am, for giving your time and sharing this wonderful information.
Anything else you'd like to ask me? Any? Not really. I suppose I covered it.
Yes, you have like very much in detail enlightened about the entire Unnati program. And I really hope from within the wall to the outside wall, perceptions of people also changes, and they as a community take responsibility towards these people and everyone else.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sandhya. Thanks a lot. Bye. Good day.
Bye. Good day.
It's so sad. It's so sad. We don't understand each other yet. How can this be when we've been living together so long and so close to each other's beauty? It's so sad, makes me feel so bad. I can't stand by I'm gonna sing it when I feel like crying, when I'm uncomfortable and don't know why, yes, when I am guilty of the lazy fears. My ignorance of you is laid bare. I'll talk to you before I raise my hand, so you can call on me to make a stand, make a stand, make a stand. Am I responsible? Are you responsible? What are we responsible for? I'm gonna look up from my own concerns and reach across the chasm of what I've never learned. So wide, so full of burning, your eyes are turning to me now, saying it's time, it's way past time to step outside the echo chamber and stop pretending it's alright. Stop pretending this is not alright. Stop pretending this is not alright. I'm gonna sing it when I feel like crying, when I'm uncomfortable and don't know why, yes, when I am guilty of the lazy affairs. My ignorance of you is laid bare. I'll talk to you before I raise my hand, so you can call on me to make a stand, make a stand, make a stand. Am I responsible? Are you responsible? What are we responsible for? Am I responsible? Are you responsible? What are we responsible for? Gonna sing about it, 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 sing about it.
My name is Leonie Small, currently retired from the Bureau of Prisons after 23 years of working in the Federal Penitentiary, USP Atlanta, a job that I truly love to do, working with the inmate population and to see my impact on their lives and their impact on mine. My role with the federal prison system is that currently we're retired as the mentor coordinator. So for the past 6 years, I've been in that role. And as a mentor coordinator, I'm responsible for the reentry program within the Bureau, within my institution, and working with the inmate population to prepare them for successful reentry. I recruit mentors, I train them, work with the probation officer, and prepare the inmates as far as get them ready for the process of the mentoring program. Bring in volunteers and mentors that can help them with preparing them for reintegration. But there are two phases to the program. There's the incarcerated and the post-incarceration. So right now we're working with the incarcerated phase. The Peace Education found us. And so I received a call from the volunteers, Peace Volunteer, and they wanted to come in and share with us the program, wanted to introduce the program to us. And they told us about this wonderful program, and they were ready to go, but there's a process that we had to go through. I saw this great program, I think it would help you. And I shared the lion and the sheep story to them, and they fell in love with it. So then I knew that I had an audience for the program.
One day, a shepherd was guiding his sheep near a jungle when he came across a poor, helpless little lion cub. There were no parents around, and the cub was almost dying. So the shepherd scooped it up and took it home. When he had nurtured it back to health, he put it in the barn with his sheep. Every day the little lion would go out with the sheep. One day while the sheep were in the field, a huge lion stepped out from the jungle. And the lion roared mightily. All the sheep started running around trying to hide, and so did the little lion. The big lion went over to this little lion, who wasn't that little anymore, and said, "Why are you scared of me? I'm a poor little sheep and you will eat me. Please don't eat me." "Eat you? Don't you know who you are?"
I submitted what is called a cop-out to the population, where they had to give me their interest, let me know if they were interested in the program. And the response was overwhelming. We had a lot of inmates that wanted to do it, so I knew then that we were onto something great. What we realized for me working in the environment that I worked in is that we were working with the inmates and giving them information, but we weren't changing their philosophy. So when I began to see it, it changed my philosophy. Is that you see individuals that may have lived in the same unit, but they didn't communicate. But during the peace education class, they were able to form a friendship. They began to talk. What was so wonderful also in observing is that it was open for all religious groups. So everyone would come in, and the Muslim guys, you would see them when it's time to pray, they would leave out, but they would come back in. And so they'll always participate. My office was in the chapel, so normally what you see is that different religious groups have different days, or they go into different, rooms and worship. But when it comes onto the peace education program, everybody was included. Everyone worked together. They support one another. We have one young man who didn't speak English, and he brought his interpreter in. And so they were inviting people to the program. So it was really a program where everyone was able to respect, and they support each other, and they could identify with what was being said. And you begin to see love. It begins to be where, when they first started, everyone was to themselves, but towards the end, they were looking out for each other. We began to see how the program was actually changing them, because now everybody's in search of peace, and they didn't have peace. But because of the program, they began to understand and find their inner peace. So if you don't have your peace within you, then you just don't know where to turn. You really are focused. So the program really helps you to focus internally and get a whole clarity and inner strength. What I observe as far as how the program has helped the inmate population, the lion and the sheep, that particular one, the young men who have kids, they wanted copies to send home. So they were actually sending it home. They were sharing the information with their family. And that's when we realized that it was not about them, but it was about helping others. Or they would go back to the unit and they would tell others about it, and then they would come to the class. So those are the ways that we saw that it was helping. Not only that, but they were able to handle lockdown better. The things that used to bother them, it no longer, it changed them. You could see their philosophy began to change. They didn't worry about the things. They weren't they weren't upset, or things that used to bother them. You began to see a difference in the group that was actually involved in the peace education program. The clarity in what it focused on, it allows them to have that peace within themselves, that inner peace. So we've taught them a lot, but we've never taught them how to find that peace within. And so a lot of the problems that they were struggling with, or why they were doing the things that they were doing, I believe, is because they didn't have that peace within. So by taking the class, they begin to understand the value of peace, and that it's within them. A good point is that I saw Prem, and he spoke about the good wolf and the bad wolf. In our environment, we were always focusing on the bad wolf. And they didn't believe that they had a good wolf in them from what I, observed. And so by doing the program, they stopped feeding that bad wolf because they realized that there are options for them. So they were beginning to feed the good wolf.
Legendary human rights champion and U.S. Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall once remarked, "In recognizing the humanity of our fellow beings, we pay ourselves the highest tribute." Let's meet the judge who now sits in Thurgood Marshall's appellate court chambers, the Honorable Denny Chin.
I'm pleased to introduce Judge Denny Chin to the first International Peace Education Day Conference. He is a judge for the U.S. Court of Appeals. Born in Hong Kong, he grew up in New York City's Hell's Kitchen, where his grandfather was a waiter, his mother a garment worker, and his father a cook. Judge Chin credits their work ethic for his success on the federal bench. He also volunteers as judge of the Special Rise Court, helping people on parole to re-enter society. And through the Asian American Bar Association of New York, he and his wife, attorney Kathy Chin, produce historic trial reenactments about social justice now performed across the globe. So please join me in welcoming the Honorable Denny Chin.
Thank you very much, Professor Jenkins. I am delighted to be participating in this program. And I was provided with a number of topics to talk about, and I'll just run through them one by one. But first of all, peace education is a new term for me. I had not heard of the concept before, but we are very much involved in peace education. And by we, I mean the court system, the justice system, and our Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, and not just in the courtroom, but also outside of the courtroom. Of course, the courts are very much a part of conflict resolution. A critical part of our justice system is to help individuals resolve conflicts, to resolve conflicts between the government and others. So I thought about peace education, and I think I've been doing it all along, perhaps unknowingly. Peace education is teaching knowledge, values, skills that will bring about peace in the world, that will help resolve conflicts, that will prevent violence and hostility. And it's important that we teach peace, not just to children, but also to grown-ups. Goal 16 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals refers to access to justice for all. And access to justice is very much a part of the Second Circuit. We've been running for several years now something called Justice for All. We have a civic education program that we have entitled Justice for All. We have a website devoted to it. We do things like bring students in for tours of the courthouse. A very important part of the program are the reenactments that Professor Jenkins referred to, that my wife and I are involved in, and our friend David Weinberg has helped. And the courts are also involved in bringing about inclusive societies, and so this all goes to access to justice for all. One thing that I'm doing, which is a little bit unusual for a circuit judge, is participating in a reentry court. The Southern District of New York is the trial court in Manhattan, Bronx, the lower counties. And we started a reentry program a couple of years ago called the RISE Court. And RISE stands for Reentry through Intensive Supervision and Employment. And the idea is to help individuals who have been in prison for serious crimes, who are coming out of prison and are on supervised release, that's what happens in the federal system, to re-enter society successfully, to improve themselves, to prevent recidivism, to appreciate their families, the importance of gainful employment. We started in January of 2019, and I had 20 participants. We've gone on to have 3 more sessions. I'm currently doing another session. A couple of other judges are involved, but the idea is to help these guys by seeing them every other week. We have a one-on-one conversation in a group setting, and they support each other. And I help them with the assistance of the probation department. We have law firms volunteering services to help with things like resolving child support arrears. If they have child support arrears, they can't get their driver's licenses. If they can't get their driver's licenses, they can't do certain jobs. So it all ties in. The probation department is trying very hard. And this is helping people live peacefully and productively. And so I consider it part of peace education as well. As for our trial reenactments, my wife and I, the Asian Bar, David Weinberg, the Second Circuit, we've been doing reenactments for over a dozen years now. We take historic cases, we find transcripts, other original documents, and we write little plays. They're theatrical, dramatic presentations. They are great teaching tools. It's really one of the more satisfying and gratifying things that I have done. And it's given my wife and I a chance to work together and to work with good people like David. They are terrific teaching tools, not only for ourselves, that is, for us to learn the lessons that history can teach us, but also to educate others. And so we've written these scripts, and they've been presented and represented all over the country. We even did one in Switzerland. And we pick historic cases with powerful stories about heroic people that provide lessons that are still important today. I've got one I want to mention for you, because I think one of these days at your next conference or the one after that, you might want to present this reenactment because it is about peace. We did one on a case called Courtright versus Resort, and it's a First Amendment case about soldiers protesting the Vietnam War. What happens when soldiers are unhappy about what they believe to be an immoral and unjust war? Well, David Courtright was in the U.S. Army. This is back in the day when we had the draft. He worked something out so that he went in, but he was going to be in an Army band. And that was how he was going to meet his obligation. But he was subjected to what he believed was retaliation because of actions he took to protest the war. And it resulted in a lawsuit that was filed in the federal court in Brooklyn and eventually made its way up to my court. And Mr. Courtright eventually became a professor of peace studies at the Notre Dame International Institute for Peace Studies. And a couple of other points. I'm fortunate, I'm honored to be sitting in chambers once occupied by Thurgood Marshall himself. He was a judge on our court in the 60s, and I am now sitting in his chambers. He was a great judge, a great lawyer, a wonderful person, surely someone who stood for peace. And I am just so honored to be sitting in his chambers now. In the list of questions that was sent to me, I was asked what motivates me to do things like the reentry court, to do the reenactments. These things are important to me in part because of my background. Professor Jenkins alluded to it. My grandfather came to this country in 1916 to escape the difficulties that people were experiencing in China. And he actually entered illegally. Because of the Chinese exclusion laws, you could not come into this country if you were Chinese. There was an exception for the son of US citizens. And my grandfather bought a piece of paper, pretended to be an American citizen, and that's how he got into the country. He was a waiter in Chinese restaurants for many years. He went back to China only twice, once to get married and once to have a child, my father. And both times he had to leave his family behind because of the immigration laws in this country. He could make more money here as a waiter than he could back home in China. But eventually he was naturalized as an American citizen. And I believe the ceremony took place in my courthouse because on the back of his certificate, it says sworn to an open court. And in 1934, in 1947, that's when he got naturalized. The only courthouse in the Southern District of New York was the courthouse I am in now. But because he became an American citizen, he was able eventually to bring all of us here. My father, my mother, me, my sister, and a brother. And we actually came into the country as political refugees. My mother's original Chinese passport shows that we were admitted under the Refugee Relief Act of 1953, a statute that was passed to help those who were fleeing communism in China. And my parents escaped to Hong Kong, where they met, eventually got married. And we were able to come here eventually because my grandfather became a citizen. And as you heard, my dad was a cook in Chinese restaurants. My mom was a seamstress in garment factories. But we did okay. And it's because of this background, because of the challenges my grandfather and my parents faced, because they overcame them and they gave us the opportunity to excel, and they were able to make life better for us. These are the things that motivate me. Thank you very much.
That was remarkable. It's great to hear your personal story, Denny Chin, Judge Chin. And David, it's nice surprise to hear David Courtright mentioned, as I know him. He's a remarkable person. I know him more through his anti-war work than I do knowing him as an academic, but he's a really remarkable human being as well. So,
we invited him to come play himself in our reenactment, and he did. And then he invited me out to Notre Dame, and we did the reenactment there. And so I think he very much enjoyed the experience. He's written a book about soldiers protesting war. So the way we got into these reenactments, the Asian ones in any event, was the NAPABA, the National Asian Bar. We would do a conference we would do a reenactment at their national conference. So I am serious when I suggest that at one of these conferences, when you're back to doing them in person, you might consider doing the Courtright one. And I bet you could get Professor Courtright to come and participate.
One question that came to mind to me, I know you preface it by saying you don't really use language peace education, but you're seeing in the work that you do, that's obviously a part of it. And the work that you're describing with the Rise Court in particular, the efforts to help reintegrate people into society, that does definitely sound like peace education to me. One of the things that we try to pursue in our work is kind of foundational to peace education is preparing people to be active, participatory citizens in society. And that story is also embedded in your personal story as well. But a question I'm curious about, are you familiar or have you done work around restorative justice through the courts? Because there is a definite linkage there with peace education, because that's obviously a very popular methodology right now, even being integrated into schools.
I don't know that we've done anything that's explicitly restorative justice. I think the reentry court is certainly in some respects restorative justice. Doing these civic education programs arguably is restorative justice. I mean, we are in a sensitive position because we are also part of the process of enforcing the laws. When I sentence someone who's committed murder, is that a peaceful action? How does that tie into peace education? I'm not sure. It was just causing me to think about these things. Judges also have to be careful about not doing things that will lead to recusal. I mean, if I go out, for example, and I get heavily into environmental work, what happens when I get an environmental case where someone is accused of polluting? Then I might get recused because it seems like I have a leaning. And so on some of these things, we can certainly be involved in improving the administration of justice, and access to justice is certainly part of that.
Yeah, it seems to me a program like the RISE court program, it provides an opportunity for introducing some of those ideas in practice, but not necessarily, integrating them into your courtroom. So I think that's a really wonderful way to make that bridge. That's the only question I really wanted to ask. I'm excited to talk about restorative justice because we see it being a really powerful tool in schools. I mean, I've done some research and reading on this. It's not really my area of strength, but in schools we see mixed results with it. Depends on how it's applied. In many instances, it's put forward as an alternative to traditional forms of punishment, and in that case, it's heavily critiqued and pretty much ineffective. But when it's applied as a more of a whole school model of reform and of changing the culture and finding ways to bring wholeness back to the community and mend relationships, it can be really transformative and powerful.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something the court should look at. I know that some of the defender organizations are trying to take a more holistic approach to things and help not just with dealing with the criminal charges against them, but trying to improve the lives of these individuals and their families. And so I think it's certainly something we ought to be looking at.
Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. The term peace education is certainly a broad one, and I think we could make it what we want to some extent. And as I have been thinking about this in preparation for this program, it occurs to me that we are very much engaged in peace education, by we meaning the courts, and not just in terms of the civic education program that I've discussed, but in the opinions that we write, in trying to lay out rules, laws to help clarify ambiguous laws. We're trying to bring order to society. And I think in that sense, certainly we are helping to keep peace, to reduce hostilities. Sentencing is an interesting area. I mean, for me, it's something I have thought about a lot. It's not a particularly peaceful act to send someone to prison. In that sense, I don't know that it is engaging in an act of peace. On the other hand, integral to the criminal justice system is deterrence. A part of what we do when we sentence someone is to send a message to those out there who would break the law, who would commit murder, who would engage in fraud, that they should not do so, that they ought not to do so, that they cannot do so, and that if they do so, they will be caught and they will be punished. I I am well known for sentencing Bernard Madoff to 150 years in prison. You know, why would you sentence a 71-year-old man to 150 years in prison? A big part of it was education, deterrence, you know, telling people out there, showing people out there that you can't get away with these things. So in that sense, it is peace education, because it is intended to deter acts of violence, acts of financial violence, and to try to keep order in our society.
I love the nuance of your response. I mean, it's in your position, I can understand why it's so important to be really clear about the role that sentencing can have, but I also appreciate how you see it as not necessarily peace education, in the sense that it is not really, you know, finding an opportunity to create the peace, right, with the perpetrator and the victims and the harm that they've done to the community. It doesn't necessarily address that, but we do certainly have to set those parameters for agreed upon societal norms. And so setting those sentencing guidelines is really important.
It's too bad we can't have like a dialogue. We'll do that at some point someday. We'll have a conversation and people can engage. I think it's great that you're bringing in people from different walks of life to talk about this topic. And so at the next one.
Yeah, wonderful.
Thank you, Judge Chin. Now for a view from the Supreme Court bench in Chile, from Lamberto Cisneras Rocha, a lawyer, university professor, former minister of the Supreme Court and the qualifying court of elections in Chile. His most recent book is Electoral Processes and the Electoral Justice in Chile.
A warm greeting to those who are listening to this brief presentation, and gratitude towards those organizers for inviting me. I am a former minister of the Supreme Court and of the Qualifier Electoral Court of Chile, and I speak as a citizen on the one hand and as a judge on the other. I am retired, I receive a pension, and therefore I am assigned to a social security regime because I continue to develop various professional activities that have a lot to do with those I conducted during my time in the judiciary. This meeting revolves around peace, particularly peace education. There are different approaches for conceptualizing peace, but there seems to be no doubt that we can distinguish between the outside, this is a peaceful society or in peace, and the inner, this is the encounter with ourselves, the balance between rationality and emotionality. And certainly, there is a reversible link between the peace of the society and the peace within. If we look at Objective 16 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Program, we find that the goal is to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, to provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. What has the Chilean judiciary done in regards to these matters? I will now highlight aspects of the judiciary that agree with this objective. First, the access to justice for vulnerable people. The judiciary has developed and continues to develop a strong plan in this regard, in accordance with the dictates of the Ibero-American judicial power. And consequently, it has worked to promote the access to justice for disabled persons, children and teenagers, members of indigenous peoples, etc. All the groups that those judicial powers, the judicial branches consider as vulnerable groups. Then it is also worth mentioning the more expeditious processing of cases, which is done electronically. This allows the access to justice to many people who live in distant places And also, it allows lawyers to process cases more rapidly. Third, the drug rehabilitation plan, which consists of the operation of drug treatment courts. This consists in voluntary activity by the judges in the criminal sector to treat those people who are detained, deprived of liberty, but who are affected by the issue of drugs so that they may begin to distance themselves from the drugs. And by the time they leave the system, they already have the advantage of being rehabilitated from drugs. This is a very, very successful program. There's also the prosecutor's visits to the jails. This means that prosecutors from all over the country, besides other visitors, visit correctional institutions. Now, this fundamentally ends with highlighting the unfavorable points of the prison system, particularly in terms of infrastructure and also as a system of treatment for the inmates. But it's not a question of having a positive or proactive approach, we could say, but a question basically of fiscal monitoring. But sometimes it helps to make people aware of the inmates' bad situation. And I will mention lastly, so I don't exceed myself on this topic, the visits to minors' homes made by family court judges. I call them minor homes in general, perhaps from old terminology. But these are visits to homes of children or teenagers who are there mainly for security measures and who periodically receive visits from family court judges to check on their evolution and also to evaluate the situation they are in. No one in Chile is unaware that the issue of the National Service for Minors, SENAME, is a complicated one. It has been difficult to manage and it has caused many problems in society. Then, to the extent that this is possible, the judges collaborate with promoting the respect for the dignity of those people, of these children and adolescents, and ultimately facilitating their evolution. In regards to the issue of conditional release, which is also an interesting issue, it must be said that in Chile, this is a very controversial situation. Periodically, the traditional debate reappears between an open mind, that is a tendency to wish to rehabilitate, or in favor of rehabilitation, and the strictness that is expressed in regulatory rigidities and very strong demands. So, when the Special Commission that twice a year meets to review who will be granted parole, pertinent to a proposal from the gendarmerie, and if the commissions grant enough people parole, there is a very strong opposition from certain media and people who are in favor of rigidity and severe punishment, as opposed to promoting rehabilitation, which seems to be, as generally understood, the purpose of the penalties that are applied to people. There are few serious support programs for persons deprived of their liberty, and they often do not cooperate at all, so that a vicious circle is created. It is not possible to do work, at least formally, derived from the direct activities of the state if there is no collaboration and prior understanding of the persons who are deprived of their liberty. Inmates who have been released and are on conditional release have practically no support, nor are they properly monitored except for a brief surveillance from a gendarmerie agent who is usually overworked. In synthesis, there is no public policy in place with sufficient resources to support these people. And every time one of them reoffends, and we have had in Chile a couple of very, very high-profile cases, almost scandalous, special emphasis is made on the fact that this person was enjoying conditional release, and in it he reoffended, and often in the same manner, and sometimes not exempt from those of a sexual nature. Finally, in this brief presentation, I will mention the rights of indigenous people. We may say, in general, that the role of the courts in this matter does not go beyond sentencing pursuant to the law. Since indigenous people don't have specific rights protected particularly by the courts, they have the same rights as every citizen, as every person. And when they come to the courts, there are no special courts for them. They are judged by the same courts as everyone else. However, we may note that these people, members of the original indigenous people, are especially considered in the program of access to justice for vulnerable individuals and groups, which means that their treatment must be consistent with that condition, particularly in the formal stages of access to justice. We're talking about language, schedules, respecting some customs, which are important for them, because they arrive at a place where things are handled, formalities are used, and the judgment is made according to what we are familiar with in society in general, and not according to what they experience in their communities. So to this extent, which is not much, but it is an important measure, the judiciary collaborates to improve the access to justice for these indigenous people. In regards to these indigenous people in criminal matters, there has been lately an increase in consideration or respect for their customs, particularly for the Mapuche people. So those who are in prison may attend to some of their routines or rights in their communities with the appropriate safeguards, of course. Naturally, it's not an easy matter, since some of the Mapuche people from the Araucania region have a behavior typical of a confrontation, which gives rise to strong reactions from the police forces, and almost daily we have evidence of problems deriving from these confrontations or from some form of behavior or another. It is a difficult problem, but as I said, it opens a path that shows that the courts are respecting these customs and rituals of the original peoples to some extent. With this brief synthesis, I mean to share the small contribution that the courts make towards peace, to the extent that they are respecting the rights of these vulnerable groups, and they are adhering to the postulates of international organizations, particularly the United Nations in regards to what peace is. And from this perspective, it is obvious that there is a need for programs directed to the education of the inner aspect of people, so that they may grasp the significance of finding out who they are, and from that conviction from within, face what comes next in their life, in society. And this does not only apply to those who are in prison, it applies to those who are their custodians, it applies not only to those who are inside the establishment for minors, but also to those who are their custodians. So in this field, there is an extraordinary activity to do, and any contribution is always very welcome. I reiterate my thanks and greetings to all those who have been able to listen to me.
Sencillo, toma 3, acción.
La paz es posible.
La paz no solo es posible, es inevitable.
La paz cruza fronteras.
Ajá, yeah. Prima de vida directo desde la esquina. Lo que he vivido, maniga, tú no te lo imaginas. Una pistola apuntando directo a tu retina, pero encontré la claridad en medio de la neblina. La paz es posible si no nos convive. Si todos nos unimos, somos indetenibles.
Para los Blood, la paz primero fue algo extraño, porque estábamos acostumbrados a un mundo de violencia y fue extraño en realidad en algún momento decir, bueno, paremos.
Miro tiempo atrás y recuerdo lo que fui, los problemas que viví, pero proseguí. Estaba en un camino oscuro, yo lo sé, pero pensé en mi futuro y me alejé. Ahora estoy bien, ahora estamos bien, y si tú quieres también puedes estar bien.
Hemos cambiado la mirada que tenían hacia nosotros la gente, ya ahora ya no nos miran como una pandilla más, sino como alguien que hacemos cosas buenas para mejorar nuestro entorno y nuestra comunidad.
Empezaron a abrirse puertas para nosotros, la gente empezó a apoyarnos.
Vengo de un barrio bajo, rodeado de artistas obreros, donde no falta el relajo. Si el callejón te cierra, tú decides si cruzarlo. La vida es una sola y con respeto se la vive. Solo sigue tu sueño, que aquí todo es posible.
Los ha ayudado a hacer una tregua con otras pandillas y ahora pueden hablar con la prefectura y hacer muchísimas cosas que en realidad ayuden. La paz interna como un don, las acciones hacen tu esencia sin discusión. El mensaje que a todos se enfrenta en conclusión. Solidario con mi barrio, mi amigo, mi nación. Y nunca queda mi energía escasa. Saco mi paz y la cuelgo con bandera blanca y sobrepasa. Uniendo gente porque es posible. Tu paz, mi paz, la paz sí es posible.
Gracias que existe un mañana para responder por lo que hice ayer. Alzando la frente, dando el pecho que esto es serio. No voy a poner ningún pero si me toca comenzar de cero. Lo haré porque yo quiero. Lo que yo quiero es que haya alegría para todos y está en nosotros. Basta de si yo puedo imponer un buen rostro. Solo búscala, que la paz está en nosotros.
Me levanto muy temprano y le pido a mi Dios que la paz se riegue en el mundo, alzo mi voz. Que nos amemos todos con todo el corazón. Que se acaben las guerras, por favor, ay mi Dios.
La paz es posible, es inevitable. En cada ser vivo cabe, solo búscala, siéntela, bríndala, no tienes que buscarla. Siempre está contigo, solo de ti depende lo que quieras hacer. Si ayudas a tu prójimo, lo dejas caer. Porque la paz es posible, posible es.
Porque la paz es posible, posible es. Porque la paz es posible, posible es. Porque la paz es posible, posible es. Porque la paz es posible, posible es.
La paz es posible.